Hi, folks, and welcome to the Business Corner. I am absolutely thrilled to have our next guest on here, which is Stephanie Stuckey, the CEO of Stuckey Corporation. And they are famous for their pecan rolls, and they were really huge in the 60s, 50s, and 60s as your go-to pull-up diner when you were on a road trip. And I want to thank you for coming on and thank you for sitting with me.
It's my pleasure.
Great. So, um, Stuckey's was a family company, like most of the companies were back in the 50s and 60s. And your dad grew it and grew it and grew it. So, what exactly happened it uh, that it fell into that it got actually sold to another corporation? Can you give us a little history on that?
A
Because it
lot happened. So I'll try to condense 80 years worth of family business history. But in short, our story is not unlike what you see with a lot of visionary entrepreneurial founders of businesses that many of which are household names like Kentucky Fried Chicken or Wendy's with Dave Thomas. They had these founders that started an amazing brand and they sold for a variety of reasons. My grandfather sold because he was getting older, a little tired maybe, and wanted to continue seeing the business grow, but lacked the financial and the operational capacity to do so. And he thought, in fairness to him at the time, that he had found a good fit. And I think there's a cautionary tale here for business owners who are listening that even though I think he really did his due diligence, and he found a fit that worked at the time. And the company that bought Stuckey's is called Pet Corporation. They're still around, but they've been bought out by a variety of companies. But they were best known for their condensed milk based out of St. Louis. And they also at the time owned Whitman's, if you remember the candy samplers.
Yes.
So it seemed like a good fit. My grandfather was put on the pet board and he was made head of the Stuckey's division within Pet. And that continued well for almost a decade. But then a series of unfortunate events occurred. The head of Pet, with whom my grandfather had a very good relationship, died unexpectedly in his 40s of a heart attack. And the new person that was promoted from within and was promoted from finance. He was an accountant. And I'm not trying to diss accountants, but this individual did not get the brand. He got numbers. He was a numbers guy. He looked at the balance sheet and he didn't understand what was special about Stuckey's. And somewhat of a generalization, but I think this happens, that when a brand that is really personal and unique gets taken over by a large corporation, oftentimes the magic gets lost. And that's what happened. It was out of family hands for decades.
Yep, I understand that. I remember growing up, we would always usually go to Shoney's
Yes.
for Sunday brunch, right? Shoney's was the place to go that you went after church to go eat with your family and everybody else. And growing up, Shoney's was actually a fairly good, actually really good restaurant
Oh, yeah.
when it was owned by the family. And now, a few years while I was growing up, a few years later, the dad who owned the business, he left or he retired, stepped down. I think his sons took it over for a little bit, but I don't think they were interested in running it. And
Yeah.
you could tell that the quality just went downhill. And I think they eventually sold it to some, and it's kind of faded out of American history, like quite a few family owned stores and restaurants did. And it's kind of a shame because
Exactly.
they're all part of American heritage.
So
Um,
many of those brands. I mean, Holiday Inn, it's still around, but it's owned by IHG International
mhm.
Hotel Groups, which is based in Atlanta. I know people who work for the company. It's a good company, but I'll be honest, it's not the same. It's not the Holiday Inn that I loved growing up with those amazing marquee signs founded by Kimmons Wilson, who was a friend of my grandfather's. They were in YPO, Young Presidents Organization, together. Howard Johnson's, those restaurants
Yeah.
are all gone, all of
Yeah.
them. So the hotels are still around, owned by Wyndham, if I remember correctly. I mean, you literally need a flow chart to keep up with all the mergers and acquisitions of these classic brands.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's a shame. It's a shame. I think and I had a post this week on Harlan Sanders, the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken, Colonel Sanders.
Yes, you did.
And I was amazed at the reaction that post got. Last I checked, it was almost 175,000 engagements within a 3-day period.
Wow.
And that's, I'd love to pat myself on the back and say, wow, that was such an eloquent post. But it was the brand, it was the connection, it was that people have an emotional, visceral feeling about these classic brands. And I would love it if more corporations recognize that there is something really special about some of these brands that you just can't see on a balance sheet.
You can't capture. You can't
Yes.
capture in, the one, and usually when they get into the I call them the conglomerate enterprises, it kind of
Yeah.
loses itself somewhere.
And there's a
Um,
balance. I mean, you obviously have to be fiscally responsible and you have to be
oh,
profitable. And I watch our cash flow like crazy at Stuckies because we grow at the speed of cash, is what I like to say. But there's a balance. And you said something about fading away, and it reminded me of that song lyric. And I can't remember the song. Maybe somebody can post in a comment on what the song is. But, it's better to burn out than fade away.
that would be Pyromania by Led Zeppelin, I do believe.
Led Zeppelin, yes. Yeah, dating back to my teenage years. And I think a lot of these brands, sometimes it might have been better if they just burn out. You don't always have to pass them along to the next generation, because sometimes the next generation doesn't manage the brand right, or maybe a corporation doesn't get it. And sometimes it might be better just to say, we had a great run, we're shutting down. Now, having said that, I'm really delighted that I was able to rescue Stuckies, and my father bought the company back in 1985. So credit to him as well, that we were able to get the brand back, which is just unheard of.
So that's a great segue, kind of leading into my next question here is, what was the effort it took to actually get the company back? And not only just get the company back, this is like a true like rising of the phoenix
Yeah.
moment, right? Because people were familiar with Stuckies, and even nowadays people kind of know about it. They've seen the candies on the shelves and things like that. But this is the marketing, and what really impressed me is when you hit LinkedIn, it was just out of the blue. It was like
Yeah.
the Kool-Aid man through the wall type commercial of Stuckies is here, Stuckies is back, and
Yeah.
we're on fire. So it's a real rising of the phoenix type of moment here. So what's been like the struggle? What was the struggle to actually get the corporation back from the people that had it?
And thank you for that analogy. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and our symbol is the phoenix rising from the ashes. Our town was burned down during the Civil War, and it's a town that is constantly reinventing itself. So I really relate to that symbolism. The interesting thing is that it was surprisingly easy to get Stuckies back in the family. The challenge has been reviving Stuckies. So without going into too much detail, my father in 1985 was approached by the company that bought Stuckies, and the brand was losing money. And to make matters worse, not only were they hemorrhaging cash, but the franchisees that were still around, many stores had been lost, but the franchisees that were still around were irate at how the
Oh,
company was being mismanaged and the lack of support. And so they were threatening lawsuits. And so not only losing money, but then facing litigation costs and attorney's fees. So the company was IC Industries, the name of the company that had it at the time. And they were frankly looking to unload the Stuckies. It was a albatross around their necks that they wanted to unload. And my father at the time had his own career, was running several successful businesses, including he founded a company that owned the franchise rights for Interstate Dairy Queen Corporation. I mean, that was the
oh,
name of his company. He owned the franchise rights to Dairy Queen stores on the interstate highway system in the US. Big company. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
really how my father made his money. So he was doing that, and Stuckey's was a bit of a side hustle for him. And I don't mean to diminish it at all, but he had a very successful company. And he also
Right.
did Popeyes franchises. He owned a timber company. He owns a small town bank. So he had all this other stuff going on. And had it not been the family brand, I doubt he would have been able to take it on. But the way he managed to keep Stuckey's alive was to co-brand with Dairy Queen. So he did that successfully for decades and retired about 10 years ago, and along with his business partners. And they frankly largely left Stuckey's in the hands of just two management members of the management team that were still left. And there was not a CEO, there was not a marketing budget, there was not a strategic plan. And that's not to say they didn't care about the brand. It was just like life
It's
intervened.
it's
Yeah.
like there's this thing here and we like it, but we don't know what to do with it
Yeah. And they were all
situationally.
retiring. And so, and my dad was still involved and is still involved, but they, they were just getting older. And so how I got the company, I had my own career, and I was head of sustainability for City of Atlanta. I'm an attorney. I'm a former state representative. And I was happy in a role working as sustainability director for a environmental nonprofit in Atlanta. And I was approached by my dad's former business partners who jointly owned 49% of Stuckey's. When they approached me, it was frankly strictly an investment. They asked me if I wanted to buy their shares of Stuckey's. And I looked at the books, saw that the company had been losing money since 2016. This was a year ago. It was actually November 2019. And so I negotiated the price. And then I realized if I was going to invest, frankly, what was largely my life savings into this company that didn't have a CEO, that someone needed to run the company. So even though I
Oh
haven't
yeah.
run a company before, I have run a law firm. I ran an environmental law firm for several years before I got tapped for the sustainability gig. I balanced a budget when I was a state representative. I've served in leadership positions, and no one else wanted it. So I took it on, and within 6 months, I bought out my father's shares. And so then I
Wow.
owned the company outright. And then right after that, I realized I needed support. And so I merged with a healthy pecan company, and the head of that company is co-running and co-owner of Stuckey's with me. He's president, I'm CEO.
That's
I'm also
great.
chief marketing officer, chief storytelling officer, chief brand officer. I'm head of sales. That's what happens when you run a small business. You literally have a dozen hats.
And you know what? That's something important that I want the people that that see this video to understand, because right now right now in the corporate world and in the news media and everywhere else, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of friction, real big friction between what people say are the company owners and the employees, and there's this I think, to somewhat degree, a dishonest narrative that the people that are in your position, the CEOs and owners of the company, are just kind of like sitting back, not doing anything and collecting these huge salaries. And I know that's not the case.
Not the case.
I know it's not the case. I'm looking at your position and where you are at and where you're in. And like you said, you're the CEO, you're the marketing manager, you're the brand representative, you're probably doing the legal stuff since you have a law degree.
I am doing most of the legal work. I do have some outside counsel, but hourly basis.
You
Yeah,
know,
I do a lot of the legal work.
you're investing probably on, from most business owners and CEOs that I know, you're investing over 100 hours a week
Easily.
easily, right? And you're working 16, 17 hours a day.
Absolutely.
and not just Monday through Friday, we're talking Sunday to Saturday.
Oh yeah, I work
And
weekends.
exactly. And so the effort and, as I say, the more risk, the more reward, the more responsibility, the more money you get out of it. And you are the perfect example of what people need to understand of what it takes. And my next question this is a good segue into my next question as well. You have sacrificed a lot. There are a lot of sacrifices that I'm sure that you have made to get Stuckies to the point that you have so far. And the sacrifice has been with, family, time, obviously time, money, because, you bought a company that was basically, most people would have written it off at this point. You know what I'm saying? They would have done a asset liquidation. They would have
Yes.
liquidated all the assets they could. They would have bought out all of the they would have bought the franchisees out of their contracts, liquidated what they could liquidate, and then that would have been the end of it. So I would like you to tell the people that are going to watch this video, what are some of the biggest sacrifices that you have incurred since you have taken this on?
Well, thank you for that. I think people don't often realize everything that goes into running what I call an 80-year-old startup. And, you ask about salary. I'm reading a wonderful book right now, Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. And he's going through a lot of what I've gone through, which is initially, I'm not earning a salary. That's the dirty secret often, or maybe the untold secret of running a small business or being an entrepreneur. I gave myself a runway. I had savings, I had life savings. And so I set aside a certain amount. I'm living on a very tight budget. And I'm fortunate that I have a house that I can afford, and I ride my bike. You can see it behind me. I drive an electric vehicle, which I charge with solar for my house. So my expenses are very low. I live a simple life. And I am fully anticipating to start taking a salary. That is in the plan, that's in the budget for me to take a salary. But I had some runway there because I wanted to be able to focus wholly on the company. And here's the other thing, once I am taking a salary, I'm not going to take a big salary. My goal is to reinvest in this brand. I want to build this brand, and I don't want to just build it for the money. And certainly I want to have it be a profitable company, and a very profitable company, but it's bigger than that. It is a vision of not just my family, not just reviving what I know my grandfather believed in. And I was blessed to have known him up until age 12, and I have very strong memories of him. But it's something magical about the road trip, of that uniquely American experience of getting in a car and being able to explore this country. And sometimes there's some ugly parts or some not so wonderful parts. I just did a cross country trip from LA to Atlanta, and I highly recommend people watch the documentary, or it's not a documentary, it's based on real life, Nomadville, with Frances McDermott, about how many people live in RVs on the side of the road. So it opens your mind to this country and how people live. And it is enriching to get a sense of this landscape, and not just the physical landscape, but the people landscape. And it's a depth of experience that we should all have. And you can only get it by driving and pulling over and seeing what America has to offer. You don't get it on an airplane. You don't get it in a train.
Oh,
So that's what, and so for me, there's no sacrifice. It's a labor of love. It's building something way beyond Stuckies.
give me 1 second here. I'll be right back. Sorry. Well, I'm glad you don't see it as a sacrifice. Some people would see all of that as a big sacrifice, and um, I'm glad that I was able to interview you. And thank you for coming on and sharing your story with everyone. I know you're busy, so I'll let you get back to running the business. And and is there anything else that you would like to just throw out there for everybody to hear?
Absolutely. As the Chief Marketing Officer for Stuckeys, I'm going to give a shout out to our social media channel. So please follow me on LinkedIn, follow Stuckeys on LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter. We just got on Pinterest. We're building that site. So follow us on Pinterest. It's Stuckeys Corp on Pinterest. It is Stuckeys Pecans on Twitter and Instagram. And you can follow me personally on Twitter and Instagram as @StuckyStop. And also visit our website, Stuckeys.com, and you can order our products online.
All right, Stephanie, that is awesome. Thank you for coming on. I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope to see your stuff and Stucky's candies and even the restaurants reopen and everywhere again.
Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
Okay.
Bye.